This new storm system is more dangerous than expected. And after digging through the latest model data, I've got some updates that are honestly a little concerning compared to where we were just 24 hours ago. This system has trended stronger, it's trended more organized, and the timing has shifted in a way that's going to catch some areas off guard if they're not paying close attention. So let's not waste any time. Let's get right into this forecast because there's a lot we need to cover. Let's start with today, because today is really where this whole system begins to show its true colors. We've got an enhanced risk of severe weather, a level 3 out of 5, now in place across a good chunk of the central and southern plains, and I want to be upfront that this is actually an upgrade from where our confidence was sitting yesterday. The reason for that upgrade comes down to better model agreement on just how much instability we're going to have to work with this afternoon, combined with stronger than previously expected low-level wind fields. When those two ingredients come together more robustly than forecast, that's when you start bumping up the risk category, and that's exactly what's happened here overnight. The corridor we're watching most closely runs from western Kansas down through the Oklahoma Panhandle and into the Texas Panhandle, and within this zone, I think we need to be talking seriously about the potential for a few intense long-track supercells later this afternoon and into this evening. Here's the part that's more dangerous than expected. Initially, the thinking was that storm coverage might stay fairly limited, maybe just 1 or 2 cells able to take advantage of the atmosphere. But the latest high-resolution models are now showing multiple discrete supercells firing nearly simultaneously along this corridor. And when you get that kind of multi-cell scenario in an environment with strong shear, you increase your odds significantly of seeing more than one tornado-producing storm on the ground at the same time, which spreads the danger out across a wider area than we were originally accounting for. Large hail is going to be a serious story today as well, and I mean serious in the sense that we could see hail up to the size of softballs in the strongest storms. That's not an exaggeration for effect. The freezing level today is sitting at a height that's almost perfectly tuned to support extended hail growth, and combined with updraft strengths that our models are showing to be unusually intense for this point in the season, I would not be surprised if we see some of the largest hail reports of the entire year come out of this event. If you live anywhere near Garden City, Liberal, Guymon, or up into the Oklahoma Panhandle, please take this seriously. Hail this size can shatter windshields, punch through roofing, and cause serious injury if you're caught outside. So have a plan for where you're parking your vehicle this afternoon if you know storms are going to be moving through. Now let's talk about the tornado threat specifically, because this is where I think the danger has most clearly outpaced expectations. Our significant tornado parameter values in this corridor have jumped up into a range that genuinely concerns me. We're talking values upwards of 5 to 6 in some of the model guidance, and when I see numbers like that combined with the kind of discrete storm structure we're expecting, I have to start talking about the possibility of strong, potentially even intense tornadoes this afternoon and evening. This is not a typical isolated tornado threat. This has the ingredients to support a more substantial tornado event, and the fact that this has trended upward rather than downward over the past day is exactly why I'm using the word dangerous so directly in this forecast. There's also a nocturnal element to worry about here, because as we move into the evening hours, instead of this activity weakening the way storms typically do once we lose daytime heating, the low-level jet is forecast to strengthen significantly overnight, which can actually maintain or even enhance the tornado threat well after dark. Nocturnal tornadoes are statistically more dangerous than daytime tornadoes, simply because people are less likely to be awake, less likely to see warnings come through, and less likely to act quickly even when they do. So if you live in this corridor, especially across western Kansas and the Oklahoma Panhandle, I want you thinking right now about how you're going to receive warnings overnight if these storms are still ongoing past your normal bedtime. Moving slightly east of that primary corridor, we've also got a slight risk of severe weather extending into central Oklahoma and up through Wichita. And while the more extreme winds and the chance of an isolated tornado as outflow boundaries and leftover energy from the more intense storms farther west interact with the atmosphere later this evening. Let's shift now to tomorrow because the system is not done, and in fact the geographic spread of the threat actually increases. We're watching for the severe weather corridor to shift northeastward into Nebraska, Iowa, and parts of Missouri. And once again, this shift has come in stronger and faster than the previous round of model guidance suggested. Initially, we thought this transition might be a bit more gradual, with the most intense severe weather staying anchored farther south for an extra day. This threat northward at a quicker pace. In this new corridor, we're still looking at all hazards of severe weather, but I think the headline concern shifts slightly toward damaging winds as multiple storm clusters begin to merge into broader complexes overnight into Friday morning. These mesoscale convective systems can produce wind gusts in the range of 70 to 80 miles per hour in their most intense cores, And that kind of wind is more than capable of snapping power poles, downing large trees, and causing significant property damage across a wide swath, rather than the more concentrated damage path you'd get from a tornado. If you live anywhere from Lincoln to Omaha, back through Des Moines, and into the Kansas City area, please don't assume that just because the tornado risk might be slightly lower in your specific location, that you're in the clear. A derecho-style wind event moving through overnight can be just as destructive, and in some cases more widespread in its damage than an isolated tornado. That said, the tornado threat absolutely does not disappear in this zone either. We do have rotating supercells expected to develop ahead of the main line, particularly across central Nebraska and into northwest Missouri. And given the available shear in this environment, a few of these storms could absolutely produce significant tornadoes before they eventually get absorbed into that broader line of storms. The transition period, right when discrete storms are starting to merge but haven't fully consolidated yet, is often when we see some of the more dangerous, harder to warn for tornadoes, because storm structure can change rapidly during that merging process. As we move into the weekend, this is where the forecast gets genuinely trickier. And I want to be honest with you that there's more uncertainty here than I'd like. The reason comes down to a secondary piece of energy that our models are now showing diving south out of Canada faster than previously expected. If this piece of energy interacts with the moisture and instability that's going to be left over from everything we've just talked about, we could be looking at a significant severe weather setup across the upper Midwest and Great Lakes region on Saturday, potentially even into Sunday. The European model has trended towards showing a more amplified, more dangerous setup over the past two model cycles, while the American model has been a bit more conservative. And when we see that kind of disagreement, it usually means we need another day or two of data before we can speak with full confidence about exactly how intense this weekend threat will be. What I can tell you with reasonable confidence right now is that if this more aggressive solution verifies, we're looking at a setup that includes strong instability, very favorable shear for rotating storms, and a boundary that could serve as a focus for discrete supercells through a good chunk of Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa. That is a combination that, in past years, has produced some notable tornado outbreaks in this part of the country. And the fact that this potential is showing up more strongly in our guidance compared to where we were just a day or two ago is part of why I keep emphasizing how this entire system has trended more dangerous than originally expected, rather than less. I also want to touch on something that doesn't always get enough attention in these severe weather forecasts, and that's the rainfall and flooding component tied to this same system. As these storms repeatedly fire over similar areas across the central and southern plains over the next couple of days, we're going to see some locations pick up 2 to 4 inches of rain in a fairly short window. And in a few spots, especially if storms train repeatedly over the same path, we could see localized totals climb even higher than that. Combine that kind of rainfall with already saturated ground in parts of Missouri and Kansas from recent systems, and you've got a real flash flooding concern layered on top of the wind, hail, and tornado threats we've already discussed. If you live in a flood-prone area or near a creek or low-lying roadway, please don't drive through standing water these next few days, no matter how shallow it looks. It takes surprisingly little moving water to sweep a vehicle off the road. Now, I know I've covered a lot of ground here, so let me try to bring this together in a way that's useful for planning purposes. Today and tonight, the most dangerous corridor is western Kansas through the Oklahoma and Texas panhandles, with the potential for strong, long-track tornadoes, softball-sized hail, and a threat that unfortunately extends into the overnight hours rather than calming down after dark like you'd normally expect. Tomorrow, that threat shifts northeast into Nebraska, Iowa, and Missouri, with damaging winds becoming the dominant concern as storms merge into larger complexes, though a continued tornado risk exists, especially during that transition period before everything fully lines up into one system. And then this weekend, we've got a genuine wildcard with the potential for a significant, severe weather outbreak across the upper Midwest, if that secondary disturbance comes together the way our more aggressive model guidance is currently suggesting. The reason I keep stressing how this has trended more dangerous than expected is because forecasts like this matter most when they change, and this one has changed in a direction that demands your attention rather than your dismissal. It would be easy to look at a forecast like this and think, well, it's just another severe weather week, we get these all the time. But the specific combination of ingredients we're tracking right now, the strength of the wind fields, the instability values, and the way multiple rounds are stacking up back to back rather than giving the atmosphere a chance to reset is the kind of pattern that historically has produced some of the more memorable and unfortunately damaging severe weather stretches we've seen in recent years. So here's what I want you to do. If you're anywhere in that corridor from the Texas Panhandle through Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, and into the upper Midwest over the next several days, make sure you've got multiple ways to receive warnings, not just relying on outdoor sirens, especially given how many of these threats are trending toward overnight and early morning timing rather than the typical late afternoon window. Keep your phone charged, identify your safe room now, rather than waiting until a warning is already active, and if you've got vehicles you care about, start thinking today about where you'd move them if hail becomes a concern in your specific area. This system still has some uncertainty baked into it, particularly when we get out to the weekend time frame, and I'll continue refining these details as better data comes in over the next 24 to 48 hours. But based on everything I'm looking at right now, this is exactly the kind of setup where erring on the side of caution makes far more sense than assuming things will turn out milder than forecast. Stay tuned, stay weather aware, and we'll keep you updated as this entire system continues to evolve. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next update.